this tutorial, we're going to be creating an Instacard that's like this. It can either have a video or an image on it, and there are comments as well. First, we're going to create the data model using the Amplify Admin UI, and then we're going to create the interface using React and Chakra UI. Let's dive in. First, I'm going to head to the Amplify sandbox. I'm going to click Get Started on Create an App Backend. And I'll start with data. I'll start with a blank schema, but you can start with one if you want to. The first item that I'm going to create is a timeline item. So this is going to have the ID, the description, and then the post time, which will be a date time field. Let's also add the content. So this will be a one-to-one relationship with timeline items. So each timeline item is going to have a piece of content, and that's either going to be the video or image associated with it. So it's going to have the source and then the type. There's only going to be two different types that we can have, which is going to be an image or a video. So I'm going to create a enum here, which is going to have content type. And the two values will be image and video. Then I'm going to make it so that my type is one of these content types. So it'll always be an image or a video. I can select from the two. I'm also going to have a user. I'm not going to add authentication for this application, but this will be a user profile. In a production application, you'd probably have this be a one-to-one relationship with the actual user object itself. So if you were using the Amplify ecosystem, you would have a Cognito user and you'd have the user ID tied to that Cognito user ID. The user profile will have more information about that user, such as their alias and their email. So the alias will be their username. Maybe we can call it username. Let's do that. We'll also have their profile pic as well. We're not actually going to create the forms or anything like that. We're going to use the Amplify CMS tool in order to create our data for this. We're just going to have the output card. So we're just going to have a link to a profile picture. Then we'll also have a comment. And it will have an ID and a body. So now we've got our fields, we now need to make our relationships. Our comment is going to be tied to an author. Each comment will have a user associated with it. I like to make these lowercase, but you can keep them as a default if you want. My timeline item also needs relationships. So each timeline item is going to have an author. And I'll call this author. And then it'll also have related content. So this will be the one image or video that belongs to that timeline item. I'm going to skip the test locally in your app for now and just deploy my model. So I'll log into my AWS account. I'll name my app, I'll pick a region. So now I'm in US West 2, confirm my deployment. So it's creating my Amplify app. Okay, now that my deployment's complete, I'm gonna open up the admin UI. If you decide you need to tweak your data, you can do this in the Create Data Model section, but I'm gonna go to Manage App Content. Oh, we're still deploying, okay. Okay, now our data has deployed. I went to the Content tab in the admin UI, and in here, I am going to add some data. So I'm gonna add a timeline item. So I'll create one for a picture and one for a video. Now I need to create some users. That's a handy tip, is to have your speaker bio and picture in GitHub so you can just send it over to conferences and people who need it. That's one of my big hacks. So that's where that picture is coming from. And I will use Blair, who is my dog, as my second user. And I'm going to cheat and not use an actual picture of her. I'm just going to use a different video or a different picture. So now Blair and I both have Instacart users. Now I need some content, so I'm going to create an image and a video. So I'll use another golden doodle picture. Very cute. This will be my image. And I'll also add a video. This is just like a stock video. Amazing. And now I have to add in these relationships. So I'll go back to my timeline item. The picture will link to Blair because it'll be a dog picture. And I will link to this image here. And save. I will also add a link to me and the video here. Now I can create some comments. And I need to link to an existing user. Oh my goodness, I keep pressing the wrong thing. So link to an existing user, me. So now I've got two comments, and in doing this, I realized that I forgot the relationship between the comment and the picture. So I am going to go to the view data model right here, and I need to add this relationship here. So I'm going to make it so that the timeline item has comments. So one timeline item will have many comments. Now I need to deploy this. So this will take a couple of minutes. So now that change has deployed, and so I'm going to go back to the content tab and add that relationship in. Awesome. So now our data is good to go. Now we're going to build our React app. I'm going to use create React app to scaffold out a React app for myself. Now I'm going to change into that directory. And I'll start another tab for my server. running like 4 React apps right now, so it's going to be on localhost 3004. Not good. Shut down your servers, friends. I'm going to also open up my text editor here. And I also need to install the AWS Amplify JavaScript libraries. So that's npm I AWS Amplify. I'm also going to install Chakra UI for React. And this I'm going to use as a component library throughout my app. Amazing. Now we've got everything installed. And in my index.js, I'm going to configure Amplify. So I'm going to do import Amplify from AWS Amplify and do import config from my AWS exports. And then I'm going to run amplify.configure on that config file. And that made me realize that I did not pull from Amplify. So this is another really important step, is to pull down our application. So if you go back to your admin UI for this application, you can see that there is this code snippet here if you click on local setup instructions. And one of the commands is amplify pull with the app ID and the environment name of staging. I'm going to copy that code snippet and paste it. And this is going to sync my application with this backend. So it's going to create a configuration file. It's going to create TypeScript models for each one of the models that I created, and essentially configure Amplify. It'll probably ask you to log into the Amplify CLI and say yes. And it follows this push-pull model, so you can do Amplify push if you have any local changes that you want to push to Amplify, Amplify pull to pull anything that you did through the Amplify admin UI. And it'll ask you a couple questions about what type of app you're building. So VS Code, JavaScript, React, source, build, and the defaults here. If you did something different, you might have something that looks different here, and that's okay. And yes, I plan on modifying this backend. I actually probably don't, but it's nice to have anyways. So now I'm going to restart my React server. And now I'm no longer getting that error about Amplify config. Amazing. So that's hooked up now. The next thing that I need to do is set up Chakra. So if I go to my app.js, which is going to be my top level component for this application, I am going to clear out this logo and apps CSS and all of this in here and start fresh. Okay, so I'm going to import this Chakra provider from Chakra UI React. This just has to be at the top level of where you use Chakra. So in this case, this is the top level component, and I'll configure it here. And for now, I'll just make it so that it returns a hello world. And I should have installed more than just Chakra UI. You also need to install Emotion React and Emotion Styled and Framer Motion. So let me go ahead and do that and fix my mistake there. And now my app is working again. Need to restart. Amazing. So now I have my hello world showing up on my page, and we can start programming more of the business logic. So I'm going to create my first component, which is going to be timeline.js. So I'm going to import useState and useEffect from React. I'm going to import data store from AWS Amplify. And I'll adjust my windows to be a little bit clearer. I'm going to import the container component from Chakra UI React, and that's just going to make it so that my content doesn't take up the whole page and it looks a little nicer. I'm also going to import the timeline item from models, and running that Amplify poll generated this. Essentially in here I have models for each one of my database models. So you can see that I have like the timeline item and such there. So I'm going to create a React component here. And this component's going to take the React children. So there's going to be other React components nested within this timeline, and this component needs to render each one of those children. I'm going to create a state attribute to save the timeline. I'm going to create a useEffect here. Always remember that array second argument. And I'm going to create an asynchronous function in here that is going to pull all my timeline data. I'm going to query data store to get all of my timeline items. So this data store.query is going to query for each one of those instances of the timeline model. And then I'm going to set my timeline with that timeline data that I pulled back. And now I need to return and I'm just going to do a quick map through each item and render its description for debugging purposes. I haven't even rendered this component yet, so it's not going to show up yet. Let me do that. Love that auto import that VS Code does. So helpful. Oh, and my timeline, instead of just being called timeline, is timeline item. I need to fix that. Cool. And now I have my amazing picture and an awesome video showing up on the page. Not pretty at all, but this is not how we're going to keep it. So now I'm going to go ahead and delete this hello world back on this page. And I'm going to go ahead and create a card component. So this is going to be the component that renders one card. Oop, and I made that a folder instead of a file. Whoops. Cool. So now I have my card.js. And my card is going to take my post, or my card is going to take the children. So the card is going to have a card header, a card main, and then a card footer. We'll implement that down the road, so we'll just make it so that this component takes those child elements that will be implemented in the future. And I'm going to use box for this, and this is built into Chakra UI. So I need to import that. And now it has a box. And this is just going to be styling. So I'll do a box with just hi in it for right now. Let's come back to styling once it's displayed on the page. So now I'm going to go back to my app component, and I'm going to make it so that inside my timeline, I have a function that loops through each post and returns a card. And each card is going to need a key, which is going to be the ID of the post. I need to import that card component too. Awesome. And now what I need to do is I need to go back to that timeline component and make it so that we map through each timeline, and for each item in that timeline, we call this function right here and render a card. So I'm going to keep this map here. I'm going to change it so that it maps through each post. And for each one, it's going to call that function that I'm passing as a child to this component. If you haven't seen the React Children pattern before, I have a blog post on that, so I'll link that in the description. And I forgot a return on my card, so let me add that in. And now you see that I have 2 highs on the page. So each one of my cards just says hi for now. So I'm going to make it so that each box has the max width of large. I'm going to do border width of 1 pixel. I'll do, so now there's the outline around it. Border radius of medium. And I'll format this so that it works across lines a little bit better. I'm going to have the overflow equal hidden. And I'm going to do m equals 5. And so the m equals 5 is going to add a margin around each card. So now you can see that there's spacing. Cool. So to recap what we have so far, in our app component, we have this timeline component, which pulls all of my timeline items. Then this function maps through each post on the timeline and creates a card for it. Now I'm going to make it so that my card renders the image or video on it. So I'm going to pass the content to this function as a prop. And I'm also doing card.main equals function. This will just make it so that my component looks, the API is nice. So essentially inside my card, I can have a card.main and then a card.footer and a card.header. And it'll all be exported under this card here, just for future programmers so that this looks a little bit more manageable. So I've already imported box, so I will keep using that. And essentially what I want to do in here is if my content type is a video, I want to render a video element. If it is instead image, then I want to render that. Since this is a little bit of a longer if statement, I'm going to do it above here. So if content.type is video, and this needs to be all caps, like so. And I'm going to create a variable here and then assign it inside the if statement. So then the card content will be a video. I'll add the controls onto there. And then also add a source. Which will be the content source here. And the type will be video. I'll put that in parentheses there. And I will import the image element from Chakra. So now I want to render that card.main. So I'll go in here and add it as a child of my card. And the card.main needs the content. So it'll be the post.content here. I also need to make it so that my card element actually returns the children. Okay, so now my card renders the video and the image. Let me see here. It's not happy about this. Video. And that's because I named it content.src instead of source. There we go. So now my video loads too. So now I am a couple steps into this. I now just need that card header, which has the profile and such, and then the card footer, which has the comments. This is much more exciting now that cute Oakley is rendered on my page. Okay, so let's start off with that header. So I'm going to do card.header here. It's going to take in the author. And I'm going to make it so that it's a box. I'm going to make it so that it's a box rather, not a pox, with padding of 2. And I'm going to make it so that my card has the card header. And I will pass the post author to the card header as well. So now there's this 4 pixels of padding on top of it. You can barely see it. I'm also going to import flex from Chakra. So this is going to allow me to align everything the way that I want it to be aligned in here. I'm also going to import the avatar component. And I'm going to look at the docs for the avatar right here. So I need to pass the source to it. And the source is going to be the author.image, I believe. Let's try that out. So now it says B and A. I need to probably change the author.image. So I'm going to go to, cool. So I need to look at my card header here, which has the author, and it is profile pic instead of image. So I'll change it to profile pic. And now you can see that Blair shows up here. Apparently it's not looking at my GitHub picture, but now you can see what Chakra does if it doesn't have a profile picture. It just has that A, which I think is actually a really nice feature. So there is that. I'm going to add a margin left of 2 to this box here, and this is going to have the text of the author's name. And I need to import that text component. This text. I'm going to make it bold and make the font size small. And you can see I'm there. Blair is right there. And Blair was pushed down because I was doing baseline instead of center, so the align item should be center instead of baseline. The next thing that I want to do is add in a spacer. And this is going to make it so that my little like dot 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 menu is pushed to the right hand side. So I'll do a box with a padding of 2, and in there I'll do the little like helix dot 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 thing. So now you can see it has that dot dot dot. I won't go as far as implementing that full menu, but you could use things from Chakra to make a dropdown if you wanted to. So now I've done the header, I've done the card main, and now I need to do the footer, which is going to have the description and all that. Probably makes more sense to put the caption in the main, but from a CSS perspective, it's so much easier to add it to the footer. So I'm going to go with that method instead. I am also going to install Chakra's icons. So Chakra UI icons, this is going to give me, again, icons. So I'll wait for that to load in, and I will implement my footer. This one's going to take the author, the description, and the children. The children is going to be a slot for the comments. So I'm going to have that comments as a separate component and hook that in. So I'm going to have a box here, and I'm going to have a margin left on that box for the footer. I'm going to have another box that's going to have my icon button. So I'm going to have the 3 little icons for the heart and the message and all that. So let me go ahead and import the icon button from Chakra UI. And then I'll also import 3 icons from that Chakra UI icons. So I'll do import chat icon, add icon, email icon from Chakra icons. Okay, so now those are imported. Inside my box, I'm going to have 3 icon buttons. And they're all going to have variant equals ghost on there. So I'll paste 3 of those. Amazing. And each one's going to need an icon. The first one I'm going to have be the add icon. Then the chat icon, and then the email icon. Now I also need to make it so that my footer is loaded in. And the card footer needs the author. And the description. To check that like multiple times to make sure that I spelled it right. Okay, so now my 3 little icons are showing up here as buttons. Again, I'm not going to implement them. It goes kind of beyond the tutorial, but in a full application, you'd probably make those do something. Now I'm going to add another box with a margin top of 3, so there's a little bit of a margin in between these 2 boxes. I'm going to add text. I'm going to add some bold text here. So I'm going to have the author alias there. And then I'm going to have the description. And instead of author alias, it's going to be username. Okay, so now Blair says my amazing picture and then an awesome video there. I'm also going to add a box, and this is going to, down the road, have my comments. It's like a little slot for comments right there. And then I'm also going to add box with a margin top of 1 and a margin bottom of 2. And some extra small font that is color gray 500. And this is going to say 2 hours ago. If you wanted, you could implement this date math to see how long ago posts were posted. You would use the posted time, but I have no interest in doing that right now. If you want to, I would use something like a date library for it, probably, and use that. I'm sure somebody has an amazing library that does this math for you. But I'm not about dealing with that right now. Okay, so now we've got pretty much everything about that list of comments. So I'm going to go back to my app.js. And I'm going to add in a comment list inside of my footer. And so I've not created this comment list yet. So I'm going to get all sorts of errors when I do this. I'm going to create a function-based component here. Now I'm not getting an error. Always exciting. And with the one-to-many, we don't get it automatically loaded in, so we're going to have to go ahead and create a query for this. So inside of here, I'm going to import useEffect and use state from React. Okay, so now I've imported the comment from models, I've imported data store and useEffect and useState. So I'm going to create a state for the comments. And I'm going to have an async function within here, get comments. Oh my goodness, my typing is going as I create this tutorial. Okay, so I'm going to call this get comments function. So I'm going to query data store for my comments, but instead of getting all my comments, I just want the post or the comments with the timeline ID that matches my post ID. So I need to pass in that post ID as a prop to this component. And I need to add a function to this query that filters only for the ones that I want. So p equals p.timeline item ID, and it needs to be equal to that post ID that we passed in. So that will be the ID of the post. So this will filter, so I'm only getting the comments which belong to this post. So each card will only get its comments. Then I want to call that function there. Now I want to display them on the page. So I'll import box and text, which are the only two Chakra components I'm going to use on this page. And since I'm doing a map here, I want to have a key on there. And then I'm going to make the bold text, which is going to be the comment.author.post username. So the username of the person who wrote the comment. And then I'm going to have the comment dot body. I probably want to add in a parenthesis here to make this formatting a little better. Let me do this. Let's see. There. Awesome. And so now let's add that comment list into the slot in the footer. Or I already did. So let us see. Did I forget to pass in my props? Yes, I did. So I need to do post ID, which is equal to post.id. Hopefully that fixes it. It did not. Let me make sure that I called this author. Let me go in here, and on my comment, I called it user instead of author. So that is my problem. I should have been consistent and called it author throughout instead of author for the post and user for the comment. So let me go back to my comment list, and this is going to be user.username. Well, bam! I now have comments as well. So this has been a long haul tutorial. I hope it was helpful and showed you a little bit of React, a little bit of Chakra UI, and a little bit of the Amplify Admin UI. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave a thumbs up on it so other people see it. Leave a comment of what you want to see next, and subscribe so that you know about my next video.